Welcome. Please take the time to watch this video carefully and take a piece of paper to write down any questions you may have. Take notes because it is a bit extensive and we will focus today on the solution. And of course, you first have to know the problem, and that's why we start very briefly with a graphic. You can see here the development of the poverty rate in Germany from 1980 until now. And what you can see is that we used to have a poverty rate of 10%. And now over 20, almost 25%. And this despite the fact that in the meantime, compared to earlier, where only one person worked in the household, usually now both work in the household. And this development is worrying. This is something that can certainly be seen in almost every country of the EU, that also affects Switzerland and many other countries in the world. So it is a development that is very worrying, and it is a development that is based on the fact that our world is increasingly losing itself in debt. For that, there is this site, the usdebtclock.org, which everyone can also call up. You can see the US national debt. They will soon exceed $37 trillion, which is a sum that the normal person cannot even grasp. And that's why we will concentrate on this sum below. By the way, as I've just spoken here, this has just increased by 1 million as I speak. The sums here are rising by $100,000 steps, which is unbelievable. Down here, this is interesting. Interest on debt means the interest on the debt that is up there, which means that the US government currently has to pay $1 trillion in interest just to keep the debt up there. On the contrary, they will get even more, so he does not pay them off, but only to pay them. So that is the interest rate, and that's $2.7 billion a day. And yes, I think you don't have to be a prophet to realize that this can't go well for too long, and that means the USA has a real problem here. Now you can say, well, they are far away, that has nothing to do with us. You can click on world debt clocks here and see this affects all industrialized nations of the world, all important ones in these. This level of indebtedness, yes, it is enormous, and the debt is rising and rising and rising. This is so in every country in the world. Yes, what solution is there here? You have to follow the largest asset owners in the world, namely companies like BlackRock are not only the largest asset manager in the world, but they have always predicted the right trends in recent years. And of course, on the one hand, you have a great computer for this, but on the other hand, it is also something you can orient yourself on. BlackRock didn't invent this, but they understand the cycles we're in. And if you look at cycles, you'll understand where the money will be made in the future. BlackRock's tokenization vision explained in 4 phases. That means the 4-step vision aims to transform global markets by migrating stocks, bonds, and real estate to the blockchain. And what exactly this is all about, I'll explain in the lecture below. And so welcome, and we'll get right into it now so that you get the right information for yourself. It is also important to take notes and maybe write down 1 or 2 questions so that you can then proceed from them strengthened. So let's make a full screen here so that you can see it well. So now 1 is important. Get ready to rethink everything you think about money. Because what is coming now is a completely new invention, and that doesn't exist yet. It takes some thinking out of the box to really understand it. Xegara, the financial revolution, the first Trinity ecosystem in the world, something like that doesn't exist yet. The presentation is solely for informational purposes, not offering financial, tax, or legal advice, nor invites any investment or product. People must independently make financial decisions, aiming to redefine the financial landscape for everyone. as the traditional system faces massive challenges, has excluded billions of people and left them behind by globalization and trapped entire states in debt. The billions in debt burdens of the states cannot be repaid for generations. That is clear. At the same time, the majority of the population is excluded from building wealth at all 3.7 billion people in the world. They cannot invest in stocks or in assets such as real estate. They are excluded because there is no banking network. So that means very, very many people, the majority of humanity is excluded and does not have access to build wealth. At the same time, many people also lack the knowledge to build wealth. The solution is there. And that's the nice thing. People maybe in Africa or in emerging countries don't have a banking network. But what do they have? They have a smartphone. And with it, they have access via the blockchain to a completely new financial world, and not based on speculation, but on a real financial world. That's how I get to it now. It works like this. So a cell phone or a computer can transfer assets to B via the blockchain. The blockchain guarantees transaction security. All information is stored on the devices of all users, and therefore no information can be falsified, which is of course ingenious, and that means absolute transparency and security that can be established using the blockchain. If blockchain doesn't mean anything to you now, it's best to watch a few videos on the internet on YouTube so that you can understand exactly how this process works. Empowering people to build wealth. It's about having the lowest barriers to entry as possible, a completely easy access to start generating income, and a very simple handling that anyone can do with their smartphone. Investing is as easy as online banking. You pay $50 into your account by debit, credit card, or other payment provider. You exchange into the Xegara currency to invest in real assets. Xegara revolutionizes the market for real assets. The ecosystem means that the Xegara currency is the only payment option in the closed ecosystem. So to be able to invest in real assets, you need the Xegara currency, that is to be able to invest in real estate infrastructure or energy or other projects. Do you buy the Xegara currency beforehand? How does it work? We not only have our own currency, but the digital currency exchange. Orasa is the gateway to our entire ecosystem, and that's why the door is so important. We can decide exactly who and how much comes from it so that our system is not corruptible, so that it cannot be exploited either. On the Orasa exchange, you can, for example, exchange euros, dollars, Swiss francs for various digital assets, Bitcoin or others. But you can buy the Xegara currency here. With this Xegara currency, you then buy shares in real assets on the world's first exchange for real assets. If you then generate income again, you will also receive it back in the Xegara currency because it is the only digital payment option for transactions, and you can later exchange it for your euros, dollars, Swiss francs via the Orasa exchange so that you can get back into the real value in the fiat money systems. All this is regulated and checked transparently and securely. Step by step. Instruction means how you buy shares of real assets. You simply download the app, you create your account using your email address and password, you choose the deposit option, PayPal, Stripe, Google Pay, or whatever option. You can easily buy Xegara, and then you can step by step in assets invest for that. You can choose in different categories, for example, real estate, real companies. You can choose, for example, whether you want to invest in infrastructure projects or. You can select by region, i.e., whether you want to invest in Europe, Asia, or America. You can also calculate the profit. Would you rather 20% return, just 10 or maybe 5, and so on, and immediately after. Can you see exactly how much your monthly income is in your own profit calculator? This means that you can make an exact calculation and see your return flow. And this is, of course, brilliant because then you have a plan. You can also view all documents that have been notarized here. They are loaded in there. That is, you can look at the documents from the notary, you can maybe look at loan agreements, you can look at the valuations of real estate and so on there in order to be able to make a decision yourself. Then you can buy these assets with your Xegara currency and use it to build a passive income. The stock exchange for the real assets is the heart of the Xegara Trinity. We have on the one hand the investors who can invest from $50, for example, who have 100% control over their own assets to build up a monthly dividend income. You want to make capital gains and build passive income. On the other hand, we have the asset owner. He gets by selling tokens. However, he retains full ownership of his asset, can use the capital for other projects, and avoids loans and debts. That is, normally we have the asset owner up there, and down here we have the one who, I want to buy a share. What about the classic banking world? Up here it would be 20%, but down here only 2% arrives. What is the reason in between? We have the bank, the broker, the intermediary, and so on. And of course, everyone holds up their hand and everyone wants to make money. So in the end, 2% arrives down here and we bring the asset holder up and the investor together on our stock exchange. Decentralized, transparent, and secure, no middleman. And this way you, as a simpler investor, can get access to high-yield assets with $50 or euros. And this is the future for real assets. Our stock exchange will have listed assets, all of which are notarized. I will now give an example of what this benefit looks like afterwards. Let's take the example of a power plant. We have a population here in Indonesia that is growing strongly. In Indonesia, it is now the case that a region there is supplied by a hydropower plant. The company of the hydropower plant has now determined that the population has grown and would like to produce more electricity and would like to build another hydropower plant. So the company has inquired with the local banks, with national banks and so on. Who says what is the answer? Always no money for Indonesia, not for this region and so on. And immediately, over several instances, the last instance was the so-called World Bank. Surely you have already heard that the World Bank, and this is a real example, made an offer and said, yes, we will give you the money. Now, guess what interest rate? 25% per year. You can imagine that to date, no further hydropower plant has been built there, and thus there where the money is needed. Unfortunately, it won't happen. What would be the solution? We digitize, tokenize the power plant, make individual parts of it tradable, and maybe even the local population can invest in this power plant and build a passive income from the sale of electricity. The revenue that the company receives from the sale of the tokens can be used by the power plant to build another power plant, a new one without having to take out a loan. And this means that no debt has to be incurred to create new value. That is, an existing asset can be turned into a new asset, an absolutely ingenious solution that also involves ordinary people in this process. This is called the democratization of investment. Everyone can participate, and usually their own population in their own country will also understand. Brilliant. If I invest my money there, I can build up income, and at the same time, our region is supplied with electricity here. Let's take a win-win situation as an example with gold mines or raw materials. You will certainly get it everywhere in the world. There is a shortage of raw materials and a fight even for raw materials. Africa is not only the continent with the largest population in the future, but also the continent with the richest raw materials. 43% of all raw materials are in Africa. But Africa is not a rich country. Why is it now a farmer finds such a place there, for example? There is a gold deposit on his land. Yes, then he can't just start the expansion because then he needs permission, he needs funding afterwards and so on. And immediately he has to take a lot of money into his hands to start the expansion. He usually doesn't have that. Does that mean? He needs external money again. How is the process going now? There is no banking network there, which makes investments possible here. That is, it depends on external investors. So as a rule, it is large asset owners who then say, yes, of course, we will give you the money and for that we want. But conversely, 80% of the income from the mine. Yes, and the question arises, how should prosperity be built with the remaining 20% in the country? It doesn't work, and it's been done that way for decades, centuries. How can we improve the whole thing now? That is, the existing deposit is normally notarized, valuations are made, so we look at how much is available there, over how many years production can take place there, and what return can be created there in the future. So people can now invest in this digitized asset of the mine and in the future make profits from the extraction of gold ore, from the sale of gold ore, build up passive income. At the same time, the mine owner receives the money to start the expansion without having to take on debt, without having to take on credit. For example, here I am to take on credit, and can therefore operate his mine in full hands and their own continue control. And so you see, this is not only possible in the field of mines or doctors, you can extend this to the field of landscape agriculture. There are so many areas where you can create solutions here. Basically, every single company in the world, for example, medium-sized GmbH, HS or similar company sizes, can tokenize themselves on the blockchain. Pass on part of your income and thus, for example, open a new location. That is, you don't have to go through this whole process as is usually the case with the IPO. And at the same time, you always have the risk if your shares are not bought or perhaps large companies will then take over them. You don't have all this risk because the owner of the mine, the owner of the power plant, and the owner of the company who stays the owner of the company, the people just participate in the value. Let's do one last example. We are here in the German-speaking area, which means that we have, for example, a completely different possibility of being involved in investments. Maybe you have already heard of a so-called fix and flip. I presented this to our property developer and he said, yes, brilliant, I can, for example, without having to take out a loan, make the following offer here. I'll buy one. Property in need of renovation, Renovia and Sanya, which in 6 months and after 6 months I sell it again and with a significant profit. The wise man makes a profit of around 30 and 40% perhaps and can guarantee 15% interest to investors during this time over the 6 months. That is with my maybe a few euros. Get 15% guaranteed in 6 months. The question is, who would like to do that? Probably many people. You usually don't get access to such opportunities unless you don't have a lot of money. And as you can see, this is the possibility. Many people can participate in business or investment opportunities that are otherwise only reserved for wealthy people. That is also one possibility. I could give you X other options. Yes, you can also digitize and mobilize shares afterwards, for example, and so on, and you can immediately finance the project. So there are many other possibilities. This should give you an impression of what future solutions look like here. Infrastructure is also a good example. Bridges, roads, toll roads, and so on, and can be done immediately. Be made completely new. For fun, I always say that Deutsche Bahn should be tokenized, then a lot of things could be improved. Yes, to understand the whole process again from the beginning. So we have an asset, for example, a power plant that has paying customers who pay for the electricity. The power plant passes on part of its income to the investors via our NFT asset exchange. They receive passive income month after month by selling electricity. Now comes the important point. Investors have to buy the Xegara token on our own Orasa exchange. So there is no other way. That is, they buy the token there to invest in the assets. That is, if you understand this, every asset in the future that will be on the asset exchange tokenized is landed there, automatically triggers a demand for Xegara, and this leads to a steadily increasing demand in the future. That is, we have 5,000, 100,000, 100,000, 10 billion, and so on assets on the stock market again and again. A demand for the Xegara currency is triggered, and this leads to a steadily increasing price development of the Xegara token. And for the first time, by the way, the fact that a currency, a cryptocurrency, is based on real values has not yet existed. And the good thing is, if you generate income, you can see it below, you can sell it again via our Orasa exchange for euros, dollars, Swiss francs to, for example, pay your electricity bill. And thus we have a closed, decentralized ecosystem, which but can also be integrated into the normal cycle again. The roadmap now looks like this. The Orasa exchange and the Xegara token, which are also both audited, are already finished. The NFT asset exchange is 90% finished. All three will be launched in an app afterwards, and probably September, October of this year, now still in this. Over the summer months, new partnerships will be officially announced. Collaboration with high-ranking asset holders and companies, new collaborations, sponsorships, and an exclusive affiliate program for the community. We are currently planning to cooperate with the first government, I can't say which one it is, but a European government. In 2026, the development of its own Xegara blockchain will start, that is to establish complete independence. This means that it is already a completely decentralized ecosystem of its own. We then have our own blockchain in order, of course, to massively reduce the fees that are currently still with the Ethereum blockchain, sometimes by up to 90% less fees. So the pre-sale phase A and B is ended. That means phase A and B. You see, they are sold out. These were 1,200,000 tokens each, i.e. 10% of the total supply, i.e. there are a total amount of 1.2 billion Xegara tokens. Dollar. There is nothing more. And everyone who buys in this pre-sale will receive a linear distribution over 24 months later after the launch. That is, in the first month after the launch. Let's take an example. In September, the launch has no distribution in the first month of September. And then after a month over 23 months, the tokens will be distributed linearly to you anyway. The recommendation is at least one. To keep the whole thing for a year so that tax exemption is also established. In most countries, you are tax-free after 1 year. So now we have the pre-sale phase C until the actual launch, which means you can now secure cigars with a discount. We currently have a discount of almost 60%. That is the current price with recording the video is 4.8.03 euros, and you can see below for the launch in September the price will be 0.14 euro, which means everyone who can shop before 0.12 has an advantage depending on how far now. This period is already advanced, so the price can then also be 678 or 0.09 euro. Please ask the person who sent you the video for the current price, because it will change over the next few weeks until the X012 is reached in September. We currently have an enormous demand as of today. When I'm recording the video, we would have to adjust the price again. So this means that in the next days, weeks, the next price adjustment, perhaps to 0.6 or something similar, is just around the corner. That means trading as quickly as possible without trading too quickly or with it now, but trading consciously by you inform yourself correctly and understand the whole thing deeply. I also say our 12, 20 or 50 will still be very, very cheap in the future. If you understand the scope of this whole scope of the project, that this is the future of financial services. We predict a skyrocketing price increase in the Xegara token due to the high demand for high yield qualified notarized NFT assets. Let's say we launch at 0.12, then our forecast is that after 24 months, after 2 years, we will be around 600 euro, and after 36 months at 15 euro. This is a forecast based on actual calculations, that is, with an average probability of success calculated by us, calculated by our experts. And the duration of 3 years, it is a realistic scenario. What is, of course, realistic and what is unrealistic is something different for everyone. Just expect that in 3 years we will only be at a 2, which means that from 0.12 to a 2 is still a 20-fold increase in the capital invested. And where do you want to have such leverage in such a short time, especially since your money is subsequently securely stored decentrally and backed by real assets? This means that if institutions and states enter into cooperation later on, you can roughly imagine what will happen here in the future, and that this TABOS 15 is far from the end. The founders, that is. A project or idea is only as good as the people who can implement it. Throughout the project are over 150 years of experience in finance. Let me introduce just 2 of the most important people. René Btcx is an experienced Swiss citizen with decades of leadership experience in various industries worldwide, including finance, construction, mining, and of course resource energy. And he has been very specialized in crisis management over the last few years, advising industrial governments and very, very successful individuals. I don't know anyone like him. He has worked in over 82 countries around the world, is now over 60 years old and could also be retired, but is dedicated to this project here with incredible enthusiasm. And now it's time to understand why he came up with this idea. He has spent a lot of time in these emerging countries, has grown up in Indonesia, for example, has done his work in many emerging countries around the world, and has naturally become aware of the problems and challenges of these countries, not only by working with the governments or government representatives, but also by talking to the individual, the ordinary people. And that's exactly the inclusion that we're creating here. We extend a hand to governments and, for example, large institutions, but also to ordinary people, and give them access to investment. And this is this idea here, which was brought to life by René Btcx. Yes. This is not just an idea, because the whole thing has been in development for 8 years, and you've heard it's almost finished now. That is, you come to this at a time where 8 years of development, thousands of hours, so over 55,000 hours have been worked on. All the programming has been done in the last 3 years from the bottom up to now. So that is, of course, a gift to learn about it today. Alfonso Perez is also a Swiss citizen with over 30 years of experience in various fields of banking, investment, and commodity trading. He heads the entire finance department, and he became very, very famous and well known at the age of 28 because he founded the first asset management company in Switzerland, and that without having a banking license. That was a first at the time. At that time, he received a regulation from the predecessor FINMA, then managed several 100 million over decades, and of course he became very well known at such a young age. Yes, he is already over 50, has also dealt with the topic of blockchain a lot in recent years, and both together with their whole team. Like I said, 150 years of experience is in there. Have these ideas been here in development and implementation? Yes, what is very important is often we are not dealing with a classic crypto project here, but it is the Xegara founders and directors are honorary members of various compliance associations, chambers of industry and commerce, banking associations, anti-crime associations, and international regulatory authorities. René Bütschi is the compliance officer of the National Bank of Spain. And also all these networks that you see here, you don't just get in there, but this is something that you have to earn over decades of work. These are networks that play a big role globally in order to be able to implement this idea globally afterwards. Yes, if you like the whole thing, then my recommendation would be yes, any questions you may still have now, clarify them with the person who sent you the video. Yes, there are certainly still questions open, and that's why it's important that you really deal with this topic sustainably so that you can perhaps create a financially successful future for yourself and your loved ones. Achieving such a growth in assets here in the next few years is difficult. I don't want to bore you with numbers. But it is one for more than 1,000 times this market of tokenization in the next 5 years. And that means that if you are already there today, then you have a very, very big knowledge advantage. Most people won't even hear about it until 35 or 10 years from now. Our site to buy tokens is www.xrworld. It's just a pre-sale page. So of course you have all the information there. Again, you can log in and after verification, i.e. with ID, you can then also buy tokens using credit, debit card, or using crypto, for example, with USDT. In this sense, I wish you and your loved ones a very successful day, a great week, all the best. And of course, I look forward to any feedback, or if the whole topic continues to interest you, have a good time and see you soon.